use these words lightly, but the upcoming heat wave that we've got coming later this week from March the 18th through the 21st across Colorado, it is truly absurd, unprecedented, and historic. We are going to be breaking all-time March temperature records, not just by a degree or two, but likely by several degrees.
So let's take a look at this upcoming heat wave and what it means for avalanche conditions in the backcountry. Before we take a deep dive, I'm going to start with a few key points. First, we're expecting dangerous avalanche conditions to develop later this week through at least Saturday. That includes the potential for large, wet, natural avalanches, and the safest travel will be early in the day. Here's one of hundreds of persistent slab avalanches that ran in late February as a result of our big February storm over well-developed weak layers. Those structures have settled and evolved over the past month, and we now sit at the lower likelihood end of the spectrum. We've also seen several warm-ups this month, which have caused meltwater to move through the snowpack, most readily at low elevations and on the southern half of the compass, less so on the northern half. Slab over weak layer structures remain, and this warm-up will cause meltwater to advance more rapidly into the snowpack than we've seen all season. Wet slabs can release naturally or be human-triggered as meltwater drains into these weak layers, compromising their strength. Furthermore, as the snowpack becomes saturated, wet loose avalanches can entrain more of the snowpack and grow large in size. So here's our synoptic weather pattern. On Monday morning, we've got this cold, low-pressure system that just pushed through, brought a lot of strong winds and cold temps. And then here's our high-pressure ridge off the west coast starting to build in. And we can see here now we're on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, Friday, Saturday at really, really strong high pressure there. So what that means for air temperatures, here's a multi-model forecast for 11,000 feet near our Dan K weather station. On Tuesday morning, we're going to see highs in the probably low to mid 40s. Wednesday, highs reaching into the most likely mid to upper 40s. And then the furnace really turns on here Thursday, Friday, Saturday, where we could see temperatures in the mountains reaching into the 50s. And then our low temperatures staying above freezing at night, getting into the 30s. Clear weather throughout the whole time. For comparison, I'm going to look at a wet slab cycle that we had last March. This is the temperatures from Dan K weather station, 11,000 feet, and a 3 to 4 day cycle that really peaked during these 3 days right here in late March. And here we saw temperatures rising into the mid 40s and overnight lows for a couple days there just above freezing. We can look at the activity from that period and see that majority of the avalanches were large in size. These are wet slabs that I filtered for, D2. And you can see a big surge of activity here on the shoulder aspects, and pretty commonly we'll see the same thing happening on the west aspects, so we didn't document that last year. And then by the last day of the cycle, we started seeing activity reach around into our northerly aspects as well, a few wet slabs on northeast and northwest aspects. Let's take a look at what some of those look like. Here's climax chutes. This is kind of your east to northeast facing terrain, a large wet slab that came out of there. And this one I'm highlighting, it's a little bit more interesting. This is a northwest aspect near tree line below Scarp Ridge, and if you looked at this thing from a distance, you would have thought it was a dry slab. And if you were traveling on this slope at the time it released, it might have felt, the snow surface would have been wet, but you wouldn't have felt like the snowpack was getting really saturated. But what was happening is these rocks are getting hot, draining meltwater into the slope. And when we went and looked at this avalanche a couple weeks later, you could see that most of the slab was actually still pretty dry, and water had moved through and saturated the weak layer, coming out of these hot rocks and causing that failure. And that's going to be the hardest, most tricky problem to manage, where we're getting these slopes that were previously dry, now getting water into them, and in some cases that water enters in kind of unique ways through rocks, through flatter slopes, and then drains into these steeper slopes. And you can see some maybe surprising releases that you might be on a slope that doesn't feel super wet, super saturated yet, but water is going to may be able to hit those weak layers when the slope characteristics are such. In the big picture, we've got poor snowpack structures out there. We've got a record-breaking heat wave coming up with poor refreezes at night. So things will get dangerous. Some of the details about where and when we'll be ironing out in the next few days, so stay tuned at cbavalanchecenter.org.